The Anatolian plateau was cold, even in summer. Inside the caravanserai walls, 3 men sat near a fire. The air smelled of burnt dung and cheap wine. 2 were Arab merchants, Ahmed and Tariq, rode weary and watching the shadows. The 3rd, a grisly Roman soldier named Marius, served as their escort. Marius, his face scarred and indifferent, finished a low, grim assessment.
Times have changed. The new god has replaced the law with frenzy. The empire starves, while the zealots burn knowledge and the old ways. Only the legion's iron speaks the truth now. The truth of decay.
The merchants listened, recognizing the bitterness of a man whose loyalty had been betrayed by his own state. Ahmed gestured toward the heavily guarded wagon.
We carry the remnants, Marius. The wisdom the West discarded. Rare scrolls, books smuggled from Alexandria. We trade Rome's lost knowledge to the Sassanid emperor.
The younger one shivered.
They say he pays well for the history Rome now calls heresy. We are smugglers of the past, risking the road to preserve your ancestors' glory.
A woman approached the fire, moving with the quiet confidence of a veteran. Her name was Briga, but she was not Celtic in her bearing. She wore the tough, practical leather and wool of a road warrior. Her hands were scawed, her eyes sharp, and the faintest glint of gold sometimes caught the firelight. She spoke many languages and was battle-hardened. Marius greeted her with a nod of deep trust. Marius stirred the coals, the fire reflecting his cynicism.
So you smuggled paper truths across the border merchants. But what of the truths carried in the blood?
His gaze slowly shifts to the woman.
Every memory dies with its host, Briga. You know the weight of the hard path. Tell your story to these chroniclers. Give your memory a chance to survive the fire and the fever of this age.
Briga settled beside him. Considering the strange, dark reasoning, she agreed not for fame but for the weight of the past.
I do not carry my own truth on my tongue, but I carry the memory of a slave girl I met years ago. I don't know what is written in your tomes. I will tell of fear, of famine, of fever. I will tell of loss.
She remembered the silence most. Kilian was born in 378 CE in a village that felt like the last island in the world. Her father, the one who carved the beautiful, dizzying spiral symbols, was gone before she drew breath, taken for Rome's legions. Her mother never stopped watching the road.
He carries the earth in his bones,
She'd say, a voice flat with knowing. No one spoke his name, only his absence. The secret Kilian carried was in her eyes, a flicker of gold, a faint ring around the dark pupil. It wasn't normal, but it was hers. Her mother, who carried the trusted herbal knowledge of the Tuath, would lift Kilian close to the firelight and trace the color.
the mark of the Druid.
She whispered.
It means you see the world's hidden edges.
Her father's spirals were everywhere on the loom, the barn door, the edge of the hearth. They were carved to be endless, teaching that everything returns. When Kilian was 4, she asked her mother.
Does father come back through the spiral?
Her mother stopped weaving.
The path is long, little one. The carving is not a charm. It is a promise to keep going.
But even then, Kilian knew she prayed to the spiral every day for his return. Their gods were the stones and the river. They asked for quiet respect, not sacrifice. Their identity was kinship. Every new moon, Mother would take Kilian to the fast-moving water. She'd cup the water and whisper.
Whisper what you need the river to forget, Kilian.
Kilian knew her mother was whispering for his name to be forgotten by the gods of war, so he could return, bringing honor home. Kilian and her friend Elias were inseparable. Elias was quick as a field mouse, Their small tooth was centered on shared kinship. They spent their days by the ancestral mounds, huge silent hills where their oldest dead lay watching. They were wild, united by shared fear and shared poverty. Midsummer was the day of protection. Kilian's mother tied the red thread knot charms. They were supposed to ward off Ak, the great misfortune. Elias's mother tied the same threads. They felt like a secret language between them, a desperate scarlet promise woven by every mother in the village. They celebrated the changing seasons with leaves and fire. Kilian's favorite was the late autumn rite. They decorated their doorway with heavy, dark oak leaves. The oak was the tree of strength. Her mother said the leaves kept the harsh winter spirits outside and trapped the memory of summer inside near the hearth. It was small, quiet magic, but Kilian felt it was powerful enough to hold back the whole world. The forest was their church, especially for her mother's work. Her herbal knowledge gave her authority in the Tuath. She taught Kilian to see the poisons and the cures, to read the moss on the north side of the trees. They carried woven baskets, hunting the earth's secrets.
You must know every path, little Druid.
She'd insist.
The woods give life, but they take it back, just as easily.
Kilian was 4. They were deep in the woods, hunting the rare blue-cap fungi. Her mother was focused, her head bent low. Kilian and Elias grew bored and started chasing a flash of yellow a summer bird that lingered too late. They walked only a few paces, or so she thought. When Kilian looked up, the canopy had thickened. The light was gone. Panic turned the woods into a maze of identical trunks. The feeling was wrong. It wasn't just fog. It was a sudden, sickly yellow haze that settled only around Kilian. Elias was no longer beside her. She called for Mother, but the sound was swallowed immediately. The shadows, even on a sunny day, seemed stretched and misshapen, pointing in directions that made no sense. Kilian felt like she had stumbled off the map. A sound broke the quiet, a low, rhythmic growl that wasn't a warning, but a communication. It was hungry. Kilian froze by a root, trying to become part of the dirt. She thought of the river offering, the red thread. Did the spirits of the deep woods hear those whispers? Did they require a different tribute? The terror was so immense, it felt like a cold stone in her belly. Then Kilian saw them, not shadows, but shapes moving between the thick trunks, a pack of gray wolves. Their eyes were low, focused on the small, terrified girl by the roots. They weren't hunting, they were corralling her. The growl intensified an invitation. One larger than the rest stepped out and fixed Kilian with its gaze. She was their meal, and they were patient. Kilian couldn't move, but inside, a tiny, furious voice whispered,
No, I won't be forgotten here.
She remembered her mother telling her never to beg a wild creature, only to show it respect. Kilian looked the largest wolf directly in its dark, hungry eyes. It tilted its head, as if listening to her silent, fearful challenge. The main pack leader took a step forward, its shoulders bunched, its teeth faintly visible. The other wolves tightened the circle. Kilian was a child, a meal, a trespasser on their shadowed ground. She knew what was coming. She lifted her hand, instinctively touching the red thread around her wrist. It was a useless, childish gesture against this primal hunger. Suddenly, the air shifted. The gray wolves whimpered and scattered, not in a panic, but in deference. A massive form emerged from the sickly yellow fog. It was a wolf, but impossibly large. Its coat the color of fresh snow, its movements slow and deliberate. It stood between Kilian and the retreating pack, its presence alone enough to silence the woods. The white wolf turned its head slowly. Its eyes were not gold, but a deep, unnerving emerald. It looked at Kilian, and she felt the gaze penetrate everything: her fear, her small secrets, the gold ring in her own eyes. It wasn't hungry. It was assessing. Kilian felt, with the certainty of a child, that this was the kind of ancient guardian mother spoke of. Kilian dropped her gaze to the mossy ground. Then, She looked up and spoke only in her mind, a silent, desperate question.
Who are you? What do you want from me?
It was not a thought, it was a pure projection of need. She waited for an answer, convinced the world was about to shatter. The white wolf did not move, but the answer echoed in the quiet space behind Kilian's eyes, not in words, but in a profound feeling of recognition and dismissal.
You know the road. You must find it yourself.
It was the coldest, most certain thought she had ever encountered. Was this real? Did an indifferent purpose speak through the beast, or was she simply bargaining with death? The moment the thought faded, Kilian heard a crash in the distance, her mother running and shouting her name. The white wolf turned instantly toward the sound. With a single, silent movement, it melted back into the shadows of the woods, the fog lifting with its departure. Only the scent of ozone and the rapid beating of Kilian's heart remained. Her mother found only Kilian moments later, frozen under the oak. She grabbed her, squeezing her so tightly she could barely breathe. Her relief was overshadowed by a sudden, choking fear and panic.
Kilian, do you hear me, Kilian?
She slapped Kilian's cheek, hard, pulling her back from the edge of the wildness.
Where is Elias? What did I tell you about the forest? You disobeyed me.
She pushed Kilian against the trunk, clutching her face in her hands. Her voice dropped to a desperate whisper, cementing the words that would become Kilian's curse.
Elias told me you wandered off by yourself. Listen to me now, child. This is the law. No mother lets her child walk the wrong road alone. Never. You must never lose yourself again.
Kilian nodded, unable to speak, the sting of the slap less painful than the weight of her mother's certainty. Her mother had spoken the promise of their entire ancestry. Kilian's safety was predicated on her mother's belief that no matter what, she would always follow. If she ever failed, it would mean Kilian had wandered onto a path so wrong, so lost, that even she could not reach her. As they walked home, Kilian kept glancing back, looking for the impossible white flash. Had the wolf truly spoken? Was it a spirit or a dream caused by the low fog and fear? Kilian chose to believe in the powerful wolf, the one who saw her heart. It was better than believing she was simply a girl lucky enough to not be eaten by real wolves. By 383 CE, 5 years after Kilian's birth, the quiet absence of her father became a terrible omen. The world outside finally broke into their small, protected reality. It started with Eamon, a ghost, one of the few men conscripted with her father who found his way home, broken and starving. He brought not news, but poison. Eamon sat by the fire, his hands shaking even when they held the warm water. He spoke of the Gothic wave, of legions destroyed at City of Adrian.
Rome is bleeding, the emperor dead, and the roads are chaos.
Kilian's mother poured him tea, her face pale. Eamon had seen horrors that made their hill spirits seem like harmless whispers.
Worse than Goths.
Eamon muttered, staring into the flames.
The Huns, they are shadows moving from the north and east. They leave nothing behind them but dust and fear.
He warned the elders. The Roman hold was dissolving. The empire was weak, but its taxes were now a desperate, crushing demand. They weren't governing, they were robbing. Eamon's words confirmed their deepest, unacknowledged fear. The shield of order was gone. The old, quiet ways of the spiral and the river spirits were useless against the chaos of history. Kilian's mother carved a fresh spiral on the doorpost, her hands trembling. It looked shaky and fragile compared to her father's strong, confident lines. The next harvest was a disaster. The imperial levies demanded more grain than they had ever produced. What little they did gather, a mysterious blight seemed to claim the seeds, turning black, the husks dry. Kilian felt it was intentional, though the elders blamed poor rain. It felt like the land itself was rejecting the Roman tax. The night before the collectors were expected, the sky tore open, not with lightning, but with a terrible slow-moving star that burned bright green. The elders said it was a sign of the gods abandoning the great Roman city. The sign of Einhog, the great misfortune. Kilian watched it move above the ancestral mounds. The village was a ghost town of sickness and starvation. The dead outnumbered the living. There was nothing left to give Rome. The collectors would not accept illness as an excuse. They would take everything, guaranteeing the total extinction of their line. The elders met by the dead fire pit. It was a secret council of the damned. Kilian overheard fragments, desperate whispers about the price of survival. There were two paths of misery: mass starvation, or a terrible sacrifice. It was a choice between two agonies: survival or decency. They had already lost many children to the creeping fever. If they surrendered the children would at least be fed, cared for as property, ensuring their lives continued under a new master. The elders were trading the future for the present. It was a terrible, desperate bargain. The decision was made. Kilian was among the small group of children chosen. No one looked her in the eye. The silence of the adults was worse than any shout. It was the sound of a community accepting its own death, sacrificing its young not to the gods, but to the empire's hunger. Kilian's life was traded for a handful of winter grain. They came on a dusty, unforgiving morning, Romanized Galatians, riding on powerful horses, led by a man named Gaius. They were hard and indifferent. Kilian stood numbly with the other children, wearing her few rags. The elders presented their pitiful tribute. The children, a few bushels of moldy grain, and a promise of future tribute. Before they took her, Kilian broke away and ran back to their hut. Her mother was barely conscious, her breath shallow. Kilian knelt beside her, whispering her name. Her eyes fluttered open, the golden rings dull with fever. She knew. She struggled, her trembling hand groping for the edge of the blanket. With her last ounce of strength, Kilian's mother pulled a small length of bright red wool from beneath her pillow, fresh, clean wool. Her hands, usually so skilled with knots and herbs, were clumsy. She managed to tie a hurried, rough knot around Kilian's neck, pulling the thread tight. It was a final, desperate charm against separation. She pulled Kilian close, her fiery breath hot on her ear, and whispered the law one last time. No mother lets her child walk the wrong road alone. Then, she collapsed completely. She had given her last strength to the charm. The collectors dragged Kilian away, the rough red thread biting into her skin. As they dragged Kilian away, she looked back. Her mother was motionless. She had spoken the law, but she did not follow. The promise, the cultural certainty of the pursuing, protective mother, was shattered by the biological reality of the plague. Her fevered body had failed. Kilian's fevered, traumatized mind seized the only acceptable explanation. If she was alive, she wouldn't leave her daughter. Her stillness was not illness, it was absence. She was either dead, or she had chosen this, validating Kilian's worthlessness and confirming that the sickness had taken her. 2. The promise had failed, meaning Kilian was on a path so wrong that even her spirit could not follow. Kilian was 8 years old, sold, and marched onto the Roman road. The red thread was rough against her neck, a constant, chafing reminder of the failed charm. The village quickly vanished behind the dust. Kilian walked with the others, silent children heading toward an unknown fate. They crested the final hill, the one overlooking the ancestral mounds. The village was now just a distant smear of smoke and sickness. Kilian looked back, the memory of her words burning in her mind. This was the moment of ultimate farewell. For a single, unnerving moment, Kilian saw something. On the highest slope of the ancestral mound, where only spirits should dwell, stood a figure. It was too tall, too still, perfectly silhouetted against the morning sun. It looked like a man, but the shape was wrong, stretched, like a bad shadow. Kilian stared, heart pounding, searching for a sign of the white wolf, searching for anything supernatural. One of the guards scoffed and pointed. Just a goat on the rock. Keep moving. The figure was gone as quickly as it had appeared, swallowed by the hazy distance. Kilian forced herself to agree with the guard. Coincidence? But the anomaly lingered. The world had offered a single, fleeting hint of the unseen, and Kilian had dismissed it. It was easier to ignore the impossible than to believe something was watching, yet choosing not to intervene. The road stretched long and dusty ahead, hard and linear. The golden eyes of the Druid might have seen the unseen, but Kilian chose the blunt truth of the slave road. The core of her being was redefined. She was a debt paid, a burden lifted. The bitter, cold conclusion settled deep within her, the law of her new reality.
Nobody comes back for me.
The story stopped. Briga was still. Her eyes now, the flat, weary eyes of the woman who had lived it, not the child who endured it. The fire hissed, consuming a piece of damp wood. Tariq did not move. Ahmed slowly reached out and poured Briga a small amount of warm water from his canteen. Marius, the Roman soldier, merely nodded his gaze, heavy. Fear, famine, fever. They are only names for the legion's tax collector. He looked at her neck, the thread she carries. It must weigh more than the world. Briga touched the frayed red wool beneath her shawl. She stood up, casting a long shadow on the ground, and walked away from the firelight, dissolving into the night. Marius shrugged, indifferent to the pain he had witnessed. Tariq watched the space where she had sat. He knew the story was not finished.